Let's write a full Kubernetes application. We'll write the application, we'll write the container, then create the Kubernetes cluster. We'll upload our container, our Docker container, to the Google Cloud environment. We'll connect to the cluster, create a deployment, and then create a service. There's a lot of steps, but once you're familiar with them, it's pretty straightforward. So we'll go ahead and start out with the application. Let me go ahead and clear the screen. And as you can see here, I have a directory with a number of files. Let me go ahead and list these. And as you can see there, I have a Docker file, I have my node modules, I have my package.json, and I have a server.js. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let me go ahead and clear, and I'll take a look at the server. And as you can see there, it is a simple Express application that has one route and that is returning the time, as you can see there. That's pretty much all that's being done. So let's go ahead and run this application. We'll simply enter node start. And yes, of course, that should have been npm start. And as you can see there, the application is running on port 3000. If we access it here, go ahead and enter that. We can see there the server hit and the time is changing, and when we go back to our console, we'll have a number of hits. Now the next thing that we want to do is that we want to create a container from this. And for that, of course, we need a Docker file. Now I already have written a Docker file, and as you can see there, it is pretty straightforward Docker file as well. I'm starting from the node image alpine. I'm saying that I'm the one who wrote this file. And from there on out, all I do is I copy that server file, export port 3000, and run the npm start that we just did at the command line. So I'm going to go ahead and build this image, and I will call it cabin fever, simply to have a memorable name that I can remember. And now the image and all of the components are going to be pulled, and the image is going to be created. Now that that has been completed, I'm going to go ahead and run this Docker image, and I'm going to expose the port as 3000. So we have our internal port within the container, and I'm mapping it to 3000 within my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and as you can see there, now within the container, we're accessing that application. And so if I reload this, once again, I'll get a change in time, and if I change back to the console, you can see there that we get the same type of behavior. Now the next thing that we want to do is that we want to go ahead and create a Kubernetes cluster. Now for that, I will be using the Google Cloud Platform, and this is what the dashboard looks like. There are a lot of services that you can use, but in this demonstration, all we're going to be doing is using Kubernetes engine and the container registry. And I have them here. And as you can see, I have no clusters and I have no containers. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a cluster. And I'm going to use, for the most part, the default options. I'm going to call this one, cabin fever was my image name. I'm going to call this one Berkshires, as you can see there. For my zone, I'm going to choose US East 1D for no special reason. And then going to scroll down the page. The default pool is going to be 3 nodes. And I'm going to go ahead and simply create the cluster at this point. Now the clusters can take a while to spin up. There's a lot of tooling, networking, and machinery that needs to be put in place. And so while that happens, I'll pause the video. Okay, that has been created. Now let's go ahead and go back to our console. And the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to set our credentials. This is a command that we'll enter here at the console, and this is using the Google Cloud SDK. You can download that and install it. And the first time that you run it, you'll have to configure permissions, that is your account. Once you do it, from there on, this is straightforward. So as you can see there, my credentials are already set up. And the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to tag an image. Now, before I do that, let me go ahead and show you my images at the moment. I also cleared out my images before I did this exercise. And as you can see there, I have one image, which is the one I created, Cabin Fever, and Cabin Fever relies on the node Alpine image. So pretty straightforward. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to tag the Cabin Fever image with a label that the Google environment can interpret, and we'll use that to be able to upload our image to the Google image repository. So let's go ahead and enter that command. I'm going to go ahead and paste here onto the console. As you can see there, I have Docker tag Cabin Fever, and the label that I'm using here, gcr.io. This comes from Google. The second part is the project name that I am using within the Google environment, and the last part here is simply the name that I gave my image. Let me show you where that comes from in Google. As you can see here, I've created a project. I have a number of projects, and if you look at my ID for class demos, it is the one that was generated by the platform. And so I'm using that here within my tag. And so I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And if we look at our images again, you'll see there that we now have an additional repository, but that the image ID is really the same one. So two different repository names, but both of them pointing to the same image. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to push this image that I have in my local machine up onto the Google container registry. And I'm going to make use of that tag that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the command here. And as you can see there, Docker push, and the rest of it is that label. Now, that label can be used by the mappings that we've made within the platform, and this should go through and be uploaded to the Google Container Registry. Let's see if that works. Yes, and as you can see there, that is being pushed up. That was pretty quick. Let me go ahead and move now to the Container Registry. And as you'll recall, there were no images there initially. And as you can see there, now we have our Cabin Fever. And we have, if we go into it, it is simply a Google container. Later we'll use this label here, or this ID here, which we can simply copy by clicking on that icon as well. Now, the next thing that we want to do is that we want to connect to the cluster from the command line, and we can do that by clicking here, or I think we can do it from this label as well. And I'll go ahead and copy this and paste it onto the console. So let me go ahead and do that. And as you can see there, it is using again the SDK, gcloud, container, cluster, get credentials. Berkshires is the name of our cluster. The zone is the one we specified. And then here towards the end, we have class demos, which is the ID of the project that we have going within the platform. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And as you can see there, we get a successful message. Now, the next thing that we want to do, and we simply want to do this to be able to verify our connection, we'll enter the following command, kubectl get nodes, and as you can see there, we have a connection, and we can query and get a list of those nodes back. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to create a deployment. We have our Kubernetes cluster. We have our images, and the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to create a deployment through which we will load these images onto the cluster. So let me go ahead and create the following, and I'll do this simply to have a namespace handle. So this is kubectl create namespace demo. As you can see there, it has been created. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is to grab the container registry handle. As you can see here, I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to enter kubectl, and let me make sure I have the right command here, run demo -- image. Then I'm going to enter the image address, as you can see there, and then I'm going to enter my namespace, which is simply going to be demo. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. And as you can see there, there's been a deployment that has been created. And now let's go ahead and verify our deployment. And we can use the following to do that. And yes, we have a deployment up and running. And let's go ahead and verify the pods. We can do that with this command. Yes, we have both of those running. Now at this point, we have uploaded the image to our registry. We have loaded that image, made a deployment onto our Kubernetes cluster. And now the next thing that we need to do is that we need to create a service, and this is the last step. I know that there's a lot of steps, but this is the last step where we will create a service that we can then access externally to be able to run that application, that image that we initially ran on the console directly using Node, then later with the container. Now we're going to do the same thing on a set of containers that are running on a cluster environment in Kubernetes on the cloud. And the command is the following. As you can see there, we have kubectl expose deployment demo, the target port. We're mapping. We're doing the same thing that we did when we're running the container locally, but now we're doing it in the cloud. In this case, we'll map it to port 80. And then we're going to create a load balancer that will give us that external access and that will balance the application. So let's go ahead and run that. And as you can see there, that has gone through. Usually the provisioning of the external IP takes a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and query for the service. And as you can see there, the external IP is pending. I'll go ahead and wait a bit for it. Let's go ahead and see if we have it. Now it takes a while. Let's check once more. Hey, now we have an external IP. I'm going to go ahead and grab that IP. And if all went well, we should see this application running. Let's go see. Yay, it is running. So as you can see there, that's at 35.196.24.157. And that is now on port 80. And we can get there the same behavior that we did before. So let's review here. What we did is we wrote an application, a local node application. We then created a container. We then went ahead and created a Kubernetes cluster. We uploaded our image after tagging it. We then connected to the cluster. We created deployment. And finally, we created a service. So we went full circle from the very local experience and environment all the way to the cloud Kubernetes deployment and then service.